Okay, we're asking you to share in the meantime. And so want to thank folk for joining us. We are live on my personal page. For whatever reason, it was not connecting to our branch page. We will go with that. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for participating. We do have some people that are going to be joining later, but that is, we need to be good stewards of everyone's time. My name is Marcia Ellison. I'm president of the NAACP Fort Little Broward branch. And we are going to make sure that we register people to vote throughout the state of Florida, and that we have an opportunity to share that information with other NPOs so that they will know exactly how to do it as well and not be fined in order to do that. And that is why it is oh so important that everyone has an opportunity to get the information, that we're all on the same page, and that we are safe. Many of you know that Pamela works very closely with us to make sure that all the information is out there and on time, and so does Dr. Osgood as we go on. But most of us are wearing many hats to make sure that the information is there, and then we don't get our organizations in trouble as with large fines and fees. But we want to be about the business of getting our people back on the roll so that we have an opportunity to vote for a candidate of our choice. Let us open up Minister Edwards, if you will. I would hate to say, let me see now. I see two deltas and I see 1, 2. Oh, I see it's kind of thick over here with the pink and green. It's just a coincidence, Judge. I just wanted to say that. I think that's a coincidence. But go ahead, Minister Edwards, if you will.
Madam President and all assembled, let us go to the throne of grace. Gracious Father, we thank you for yet another day. We thank you now, God, that you have allowed us to assemble ourselves together in this monumental moment. Lord, your word tells us in all of our getting to get understanding. So we pray now, Father, that you would increase our understanding as our guest panelists present us with this pertinent information, that your people, oh God, might go and exercise their right to vote in these upcoming elections. We ask that you would be in our midst. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. I want to say it was just did my heart good in church on yesterday at the New Mount Olive Baptist Church, where the pastor talked about the dismal numbers and in certain song certainly encouraged all of us to go to the polls and vote. And he wasn't just that, he went on to explain the importance of it. And those who had not, to make sure that we do, and all of us know somebody who is registered and has not voted and did not vote. So just us going is not going to be good enough. I usually watch Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church, and they basically gave, the pastor Crosby gave the same speech. The exact number of people registered to vote, and a number of people who did vote, dismal numbers. And then I watched the Bethel Church in Duval County. Same speech from the first lady that's there, was also a pastor. So the good news is that the word is getting out from our churches, which is certainly where we all go and where we all went when we had no other choice but to go. And so we have got to, it's a matter of taking personal accountability of what we need to do. I want to introduce a few of my friends, Attorney Birchford, and before we get started here, who are representing different organizations. We will start, certainly we have our executive committee, Sonia Burrows, who is our first vice president, and she's here with, and you wear many hats, do you not, Ms. Burrows?
I do.
Okay, and what else are you? You remember a couple of other organizations and you lead one?
I am the president of the Fort Lauderdale Negro Chamber of Commerce. I'm also a member of the Broward County Alumni Chapter, Delta Sigma Theta, Sorority Incorporated. Couple things. Member of the Electrical Contractors and Inspectors the Hamilton chapter here in Fort Lauderdale. Also run Burroughs Electric Company,
Okay.
family-owned business.
Thank you so much. Judge Alona Maxine Holmes.
I don't understand why you use my entire government name. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Alona Holmes. I'm a retired circuit judge here in Broward County, Florida. Retired from the bench after 24 years. And I'm out here in the community working and doing work with the NAACP. I'm also a member of the illustrious sorority, the North Broward County chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. I'm also a faculty member and past chair of the Faculty Council for the National Judicial College. So I do a lot of teaching of judges. I wish I could get the 11th Circuit and the Florida Supreme Court in some of my classes so I could show them a few things about stare decisis. So I'm just happy to be here.
Okay. And you all heard the minister earlier. Minister, other organizations that you are a part of as you move around the state, because she's always, and sometimes more. Mr. Edwards.
Yes, ma'am. I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I also hold a life membership in the National Council of Negro Women. I am active in what we call the Florida House Party, which is an armed branch of the Women's Auxiliary of the Florida General Baptist Association and Convention. And I just stay busy in general.
Thank you. And so, Mr. Public Defender, since you don't have your name up there. Mr. Public Defender, we don't know your name because you don't have it up there. And I know you're a member of a couple of other organizations. I think he's multitasking. See, you can't count on no Q's to be doing nothing. They play too much. Q and a lawyer. Oh my goodness. All right. How about Mr. Kenzie? Sean Kenzie.
Hey everyone, my name is Sean Kinsey. I am the Polemarch of the Lake chapter of fraternity.
Okay, looks like he was cut off. And all right, so now let me go to let's see here, Legislative Affairs Chair. She also is a life member and we always battling. And people just be talking, but we just be smiling and getting our work done. My own personal, she might have a couple of more people in her district as well, but my own personal senator, Reverend Dr. Rosalind Osgood. Reverend Senator, go right ahead.
Good evening, Madam President, and good evening, family. It's so good to be with the NAACP tonight and also to have Mr. Brown with us. I am involved in several organizations, the Fort Lauderdale chapter of the Links Incorporated. I think about 3 months ago, I became a member of the National Council of Negro Women. I also have the privilege of serving as a faith-based surrogate for the Harris Waltz campaign, and I am a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And I am elated just to be a part of the Divine Nine collectively and the work that we're doing in this season with groups like the NAACP, the ACLU, Common Cause, Faith in Florida. It's just a marvelous time. I was at the DNC turned up all last week, making sure that Senate District 32 was well represented on every front. So it's good to be here for this much needed discussion tonight, because we certainly have to work to dispel the fear that many of our leaders and organizations have in this season. We have to be faithful and fearless as we stand against injustice, because it is out of line and antichrist. The Bible speaks about the wrath of God being against injustice and unrighteousness in men who suppress the truth. And I'll leave that right there.
and certainly my counterpart, President Anthony Brown.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor and a privilege. I'm president of the Indian River County Branch, NAACP. Also, I'm a member of the Gifford Progressive Civic League. I'm also the vice chair for the social justice for Region 10 of the Church of Our Lord. And I'm the vice president of a new organization called Sentinels of Hope Juvenile Diversion Consortium. And I'm honored to be among these awesome freedom fighters.
Thank you so much. And so Sean is his internet spectrum is just so lovely. Not today. Going in and out. Before you go out again, did you finish, Sean? I think we just heard Pomar, and then that was it.
I'm a Polemark of the Lakeland Alumni Chapter of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity and a proud member of the Lakeland branch of the NAACP under the leadership of President Terry Coleman. And hopefully the Wi-Fi won't be as spotty, but it's been acting up all day. I apologize.
No problem. And so we move to our, let's see, she does our lobbyist, she's a political advisor, attorney in most cases, many hats, but we need somebody as a voice on the Hill every day who work directly with our legislators and to speak so that we have a voice all the time as we move forward and we go along. So when you hear that we are signing on to different lawsuits or this or that, with because we've got an ear to the ground and a voice at the table on the daily when in the matter of Attorney Pamela Birchford. And Pamela, I want to thank you for everything that you do up front, and I ask you to share and then introduce your friends before we get started. Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I'm excited to be here as always. And when I do come, I try to bring some of my very best friends. And I have done so this evening for this, as you indicated, very important discussion. Presenting with me this evening is Kara Gross. Kara is the Legislative and Policy Director for the ACLU of Florida. She is based in Tallahassee, so she is on the ground with me, pounding the pavements and in the halls of the Capitol. Joining us also is Amy Keith. Amy is the Executive Director of Common Cause Florida. She is also one of the co-leads of the Election Protection Coalition here in Florida, and she takes the unique role of commanding the boiler room, and that is where all of the calls from our election protection hotline goes into. So Amy is usually in command to know all of the problems that are occurring throughout Florida in the various polling places. It is an exciting and daunting place to be. This evening, we are going to discuss what is most important to us, and that is registering individuals to vote. I do want to acknowledge that this is a nonpartisan 501c3 conversation. However, you will hear mention of Democrats and you will hear mention of Republican, but please know the information being provided to you this evening is historical, educational, and factual. I am going to start off the conversation giving you a bit of history. I think it's important for you to understand a little bit about how we got here. Kara will then take us through the provisions of some of the bills, and Amy will instruct us on how we engage with the specifics of registering citizens to vote. So with a push from Martin Luther King Jr. and others, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law. This was the most important and most extensive voting rights act ever engaged, allowing large numbers of Black citizens to vote, especially in the South. Now, this did not make everyone happy. From 1965 forward, there have been constant efforts to suppress the Black vote. Now, why is that? It's because voting equates to power, and power equates to control. Through the process of redistricting, the GOP has been successful at gerrymandering voting districts to gain control of most state legislatures, executive offices of the governor, Congress, the U.S. Senate, and the presidency, and the judiciary. Now, the issue of the judiciary is important. Mainly through the appointment authority of GOP governors and presidents, we may no longer have an independent judiciary. Across the South specifically, there has been many redistricting challenges to gerrymandered maps that are routinely approved. Here in Florida, earlier this year, a federal court allowed a map developed by the governor, approved by the legislature, that eliminated a Black performing congressional district to remain in effect. The Black voters from the district, Congressional District 5, were dispersed into 4 predominantly white districts, destroying the ability to elect the representative of their choice. Now, this map was challenged in federal court by the Florida NAACP, Common Cause, and Fair Districts Now. On the national level, the U.S. Supreme Court, starting in 2011, has rendered the Voting Rights Act nearly ineffective by striking Section 5 that protected Black voters in states that have historically discriminated against Black voters. Whoever is in control enacts measures to keep control, to stay in control. In Florida, the GOP currently has a supermajority status in both chambers. Now, each time I visited here, we talk about this, and it's necessary to repeat this information this evening. This is the first time there has been a supermajority in both chambers simultaneously. Of the 120 members of the Florida House, 84 are Republican and 36 are Democrats. Of the 40 members of the Florida Senate, 28 are Republican and only 12 are Democrats. In addition, the entire supporting cast is Republican. The executive office of the governor is held by a Republican. The entire Florida cabinet is Republican. The attorney general, the agriculture commissioner, and the chief financial officer. And 6 of the 7 Supreme Court justices are Republican, with 1 being a moderate. This controlling supermajority means that policy is dominated by a conservative ideology. One prevalent notion of this ideology seems to focus on suppressing the vote of targeted populations, particularly Black and brown population. So let's look at what's happened lately. After passing Amendment 4 by a citizens' initiative in 2018, the legislature has made it difficult for returning citizens to vote while not providing any adequate tools to determine eligibility to vote. The legislature has passed a series of measures to impose barriers to voting, and we'll hear some of those measures a little bit more specifically from Kara. But provisions have been enacted that impact ballot harvesting. That is, an individual can possess only 2 ballots other than their own and that of a close family member. Laws requiring voters to request a vote-by-mail ballot have been modified, such that you have to request that vote-by-mail ballot every 2 years rather than every 4 years. And the supervisor of election cannot simply put a checkbox on the outside of the envelope for you to conveniently request continuing to receive your vote-by-mail ballot. The time to request a vote by mail ballot prior to an election has been modified. We used to have 12 days out. Now we only have 10 days. Laws have been passed to reduce and restrict the availability of drop boxes. And we know that was a very important and convenient tool for people, particularly those who went to work prior to 7 a.m. and those who returned from work after 7 p.m. Important also were laws that impacted list maintenance, requiring supervisors of elections to review voter rolls every year by April 1st to remove voters who have not voted in the last 2 general elections, who may have moved away, died, or committed felonies. You know that thousands have been removed, which creates the urgency to register new voters. In 2023, the legislature enacted yet another measure that severely impacted third-party voter registration organizations, otherwise known as 3PVROs. Those are organizations, such as the NAACP, that routinely register voters and submit the voter registration forms to an SOE, and then often follow up with that newly registered voter to ensure he or she actually received a voter registration card. This 2023 law, known as Senate Bill 7050, has had a devastating impact on registering new voters. These laws create a chilling effect, and the creation of the Office of Elections and Crimes Security within the Department of State, they have the power to arrest, and I can't tell you how much fear and intimidation they foster. I'm going to pass the mic now over to my colleague, Kara, who will tell us more about some of these laws that have passed, specifically the devastating and dangerous provisions of Senate Bill 7050. Kara?
Thank you so much, Pamela, and thank you to everyone for having us here today. I'm honored to be here and to be discussing these issues with you all. As Pamela said and explained in detail, there has been several bills over the past couple of years that have been designed and targeted to restrict access to the ballot and to restrict our ability to vote and to exercise our freedom to vote. I'm going to spend my time today talking about particularly SB 7050, because I think that is one that is having the gravest impact on third-party voter registration organizations. And so I'm just going to share my screen with you all, and we can walk through some of the provisions in there. Can everybody see that okay? Great. So again, Kara Gross, the Legislative Director of the ACLU of Florida, and let me share my screen with you all. So SB 7050, passed in 2023, is part of a concentrated effort to make it harder for Floridians to vote. There are several problematic provisions with SB 7050, but today we're just going to focus on those that impact third-party voter registration organizations. Pamela went through some of the background here, but as I'm sure everybody here knows, in 2021, the legislature, and again, this is the supermajority in the legislature that Pamela talked about, voted to pass and the governor signed into law SB 90, which was a devastating bill that made it incredibly hard to continue with the successful vote by mail efforts that we've been doing for so many years. And it severely limited drop boxes and our ability to access drop boxes. And then the next year they came back, that wasn't enough, and they passed SB 525, which Pamela discussed briefly, which created the Elections Security Police Force or office that has been used in ways that have really had a chilling effect on individuals and their ability to vote in terms of who has been prosecuted under this law and the way that the law has been implemented so far. And then we have SB 7050, which built on these, but it was different. It sort of focused primarily on third-party voter registration organizations, and that's what we're going to discuss a little bit more today. So why are they targeting third-party voter registration organizations? It seems like, isn't it enough to just go after drop boxes or vote by mail? What is this and why are they doing it? Well, it's very strategic. They understand that when we vote, we win. And this is a multifaceted attack on all of our different ways that we access the ballot. So you can access the ballot once you've already have your registration, and you can sort of attack us before we can even register people to vote. And that's what this is going after. Community-based registration drives have been incredibly successful and incredibly helpful in registering voters, particularly Black and Brown voters. We have seen in Florida that Black and Hispanic voters are 5 times more likely to rely on third-party organizations for voter registration than white voters. So this has a disproportionate impact on Black and Hispanic citizens. It is a sweeping bill that makes it harder for organizations to do their job. It creates barriers that, by dramatically increasing fines, make individuals and organizations fearful of being able to just do their job like they've always done, help people vote. I mean, that is what this is all about. Shouldn't we be passing laws that are going to make it easier for people to vote, that are going to increase the freedom to vote, that give people more access? But time and time again, we see the supermajority passing laws that make it harder to vote and that are trying to disenfranchise us and keep us from having our voice and having our vote. But we know that that's not going to stop us. Even though the intent is to penalize organizations, there are many ways that we can do this successfully and carefully. I want to talk about some of the specific changes just so everybody is aware of them, and then we'll move into the ways that we can successfully and safely register to vote. SB 7050 requires organizations to re-register every single election cycle. So it's not enough to just register as a third-party voter registration organization. You need to re-register every election cycle. It shortens the amount of time that organizations have to return their registration by 4 days, so from 14 days to 10 days. And it banned non-citizens, including lawful permanent residents and individuals with certain prior felony convictions, from even handling voter registration applications. And each of these things in and of themselves are bad. But what makes it even more disturbing is the incredible, hefty, devastating fines that were put on third-party voter registration organizations for violating these. So when you think about it, okay, so it shortens the amount of time, from 14 days to 10 days. But when the fines for doing this, for turning in something late, are so significant, that has an incredible impact on organizations. The bill increased the total aggregate fine per organization from $50,000 to $250,000 in a calendar year. So this is an increase of 5 times what had previously been the fines, just the prior session. It increased fines levied against third-party voter registrations to $50,000 per individual who handled registrations in violation of the non-citizen and the prior felony conviction prohibition. And it retained the $50 per day fine per application handed in late, up to $2,500 per application. So these are significant fines. The good news is that there have been several lawsuits that have been challenging this law for all of the reasons that it is unconstitutional and unjust. While several of the lawsuits some of them have been dismissed because of technical reasons and technical grounds. One of the lawsuits was successful, brought by ACLU and other partners, where the federal court in May permanently blocked the unconstitutional provision prohibiting non-citizens from handling voter registration materials. So that was a very unjust and discriminatory and unconstitutional provision that was in there that was swiftly challenged and permanently blocked. The devastating impacts that 750 have had create an overwhelming, chilling effect on third-party voter registration organizations. There's just no way around that. How could they not with these significant fines? People have been forced to, or organizations have been forced to decide between, risking these fines, which may be more than they can shoulder, or cease undertaking registration activities altogether. So while these are very, very challenging times for third-party voter registration organizations, it is very important to note what the impacts are, and that it is not something that is going to be able to deter the ability to register individuals to vote and to have individuals register themselves to vote. What we need to do is we need to be pivoting, which we are, pivoting our efforts to be able to address the challenges in 7050 and to make sure that individuals are registering to vote and doing it in different ways than we've done before, so that we can do it safely and that we can make sure that everybody has access to vote without being subject to these hefty fines. So these voter education efforts are strong and they are underway, and it is a perfect time for me to pass it to Amy Keith, who's going to be discussing what these specific ways are. First, I'll pass it back to Pamela briefly, but I wanted to thank everybody here for being engaged in this, understanding what your rights are, and learning and pivoting about how we can do this safely. And I've included a couple resources here for everybody who's listening. ACLU has recently launched a Florida Voter Center guide, and the website is here for people who are interested in signing up to help learn about registering individuals to vote, to learn about their rights while voting, and to educate themselves on how to register to vote. We have signups here, and I've included those links. There's also I know we're speaking to Broward County folks, particularly here. We have a Broward County specific phone banking event on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And I included a link there if anybody wants to sign up for that. We could use all the help we could get. And we also have a Broward County voting rights organizer, Joshua Kaufman, who is phenomenal. And I've included his information here as well, because I think that that will be very helpful for anybody who wants to directly engage with our voting rights organizer. So I'll pass it back to Pamela Birch-Fort now, and then we will hear from Amy, who will walk us through all the things we need to know to vote successfully and safely. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. I'm hopeful that people understand now why it is so dangerous to use the 3PVRO designation. It was not something that we took pleasure in recommending using other means of registering individuals, but the objective here is to keep people out of harm's way. Amy Keith has worked on this issue for some time. It was a great collaboration to focus in on how we could safely get people registered to vote. We do know that these processes are underway around the state, and we are delighted this evening to walk you through and answer questions specifically on how this process works. So Amy, if you will take us through how Floridians can help each other register to vote.
Thank you, Pamela. And thank you. Hopefully my internet is okay enough. Thank you, Pamela, and thank you, Kara, as well. You know, when we had, when SB 7050 was coming through, Common Cause, we are a voter education organization and absolutely a voting rights and voter protection organization, but we have not been a third-party voter registration organization ever in the state of Florida. And when we were thinking about what we could do to respond and support on this, our first step was really to create a guide about what ordinary people, me, you, friends, family, neighbors, can do to safely help each other register to vote in the state of Florida. So we created this guide. It is available at keepfloridavoting.org, along with a whole bunch of information around voting by mail. And I'm just going to put the direct link to the guide in the chat. We also have this in Spanish. I think will be up in the very, very near future. If it's not up already, we just migrated our webpage, so I'm losing track of what's up there already. But this guide is really intended to address that chilling effect by creating a new type of community-based voter registration effort, right? So we've had third-party voter registration efforts, but due to all of the restrictions that Kara outlined, we wanted to create a new form of community-based voter registration. So I'm going to just walk you through that tonight and happy to take any questions. And again, this is all available online with all of our tip sheets, fact sheets, and other things that you can download. And we are available to do presentations on this for absolutely any chapter of the NAACP throughout the state. We'll talk to people blue in the face about how they can do this. That is for sure. So first up, I think what we always want to check, and we talked about this a little bit already tonight. I'm trying to see if I can get my slides to move. Oh, there they go. Hold on. Sorry. Crisis. I got to get my slides to go backwards. There we go. All right. There we go. So I'm sure as everybody on this call knows how important it is to check status. I know we were having a little bit of a conversation at the very start about inactive voters. Register to vote Florida.gov, obviously the #1 resource for anybody dealing with any kind of voter registration issues. You can click there to say, am I registered? And then you enter first name, last name, date of birth to see if somebody's registered in the state of Florida. And the reason why I wanted to start here instead of starting with voter registration is because I would say that checking your voter status is currently the #1 thing you can do to protect your right to vote. A lot of people are registered. A lot of people think they're registered. A lot of people, they might think they're not registered, but actually be registered because they don't realize that they didn't have to re-register when they moved to a different county. So I think starting with the check status place is the easiest and truly safest thing for you as well. But what I did want to flag as well, because as we know, we've got we've got the election police, we've got all sorts of folks, and you will see on this webpage, there is a lovely little disclaimer that says, I'm not sure you can really see this on the screen. I will read it to you. It says, this website is intended for use by a registered voter to determine his or her voter registration and voting status. It is unlawful to knowingly alter another person's voter registration information or to attempt, assist with, or otherwise commit fraud in connection with the right to vote. Now, that disclaimer might be intimidating for some folks. It does not say that you can't use this to help somebody look up their voter information, but what it does is give us a little bit of pause and make sure that we are getting the permission of the individual before we put their information on this screen. That's what we do with the election protection hotlines, as well as with poll monitors out in the field. We make sure that they're getting verbal permission from the individual because you're going to be looking up their personal information, such as their birth date and their address. So I would just say that this is an extremely important and simple step that anybody can take as long as they've got their first name, last name, date of birth. But if you are helping people do this, be sure you have their verbal permission to look up their personal information. Now, when you look up on this website, it will give you their registration status, the address at which they're registered, as well as the party with which they're registered. If you check your status here and for some reason you're not registered to vote, it will flash and say they can't find your record. That's when you know you need to go do voter registration. And if it says inactive, this has come up a lot. Inactive, I'm sure we all know this, but it just merits re-saying to every single Floridian possible that inactives can still vote. They aren't included in those active voter registration figures, which is a bit of a crime because frankly, they are all registered voters. So it is really important for people to understand that inactive does not mean you've been purged. It means you're at risk of being removed either after this election or after the next election. You might still have 4 years on you, right? So inactive just means they're at risk of being removed, and they can still vote. But I do think this is really the first step of any type of, community-based, neighbor-based voter registration work. Now, as far as actually helping people to register, so you looked them up, you got the flag, it says you're not registered to vote, or I can't find your file. So the number one thing, and we know this, this is the main problem, right? You cannot collect a paper voter registration form. That is truly the one thing to remember from this training. There are lots of workarounds to this, but you cannot collect a paper voter registration form from anybody who's not your spouse, your child, or your parent. Even if it's your sister, you cannot collect it. If you collect even one form, you are obligated to register as a third-party voter registration organization. So we can't collect that form. So there are other ways that we can help, and that's what we're going to talk about, how we do that. The second thing to know, besides the fact that you can absolutely not collect a form, is that eligibility to vote is very tricky in Florida right now, and eligibility to vote can get people arrested in the state of Florida right now. So it is important to understand when you're working with folks, and this is a service that 3P VROs provided. They provided training so that people could understand how to deal with eligibility questions. And so now when we're out there and we're just helping our family, our friends, and our neighbors, this is a lot of burden on the helper to understand some of this eligibility stuff. And so our guidance would be, in general, you've got the 5 main categories to know if you're eligible to register to vote in the state of Florida. You have to be at least 18 years old, although 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds can pre-register. You have to be a resident of the state of Florida. You have to not have been adjudicated mentally incapacitated with respect to voting. And you must have not been convicted of a felony or have had your rights restored. Now, if you are talking to somebody and they're not sure about the answers to one of these questions, they should not register to vote, right? There are organizations who can help them sort out their eligibility, but as you advising other people in your community, individual to individual, you shouldn't advise somebody about their eligibility to vote. You should talk to them about the criteria, and they need to determine what their eligibility is, if they think they can fill this out accurately. And I just always like to make a note that, there are a lot of categories. We talk a lot about people with prior felony convictions and eligibility, but there may also be confusions for people who have a green card and aren't sure, right? There may also be questions for people not understanding what it means to be adjudicated mentally incapacitated with respect to voting. There are also questions about Florida residency. For some of these questions, you can call the 866 Our Vote hotline, and they will help you figure out what the definition of residency is in Florida. So there are resources available at 866 Our Vote if somebody has further questions about this. When it comes to eligibility for people who have a past felony conviction, there is a lot of support that is available across the state. So we have support from the Division of Elections. We're currently in the process of developing a new rule to try to make that process work better. We don't know how that rule is going to come out, but we're going to fight the fight and try to make it easier for people to get an official decision from the state. In the meantime, we also have support. There's a wonderful online tool from the Campaign Legal Center. It's really easy to print up a QR code for that and let folks go there to determine if they think they're eligible. We also, of course, have the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition has a hotline that you can provide to folks to help get assistance. And the League of Women Voters of Florida can provide referrals for pro bono legal support for any individual who does need this assistance. So I am going to try and see if Zoom will let me post like a whole giant long chat here. Let's see if it lets me do this. It's not letting me do this. So I will share that at the end. each of those resources and how you can link to them. But again, they are all available at keepfloridavoting.org and that link I shared earlier. I think it's just worth noting again that it is illegal to submit false information on a voter registration application, which is why we take this so seriously. Somebody is signing an oath of their eligibility. So truly don't ever advise or encourage somebody to register if they're not sure that they're eligible. Any questions? I want to pause there about eligibility because I know that this can get sticky, so I just want to kind of quickly pause there. All right. Next up, I'm sure everybody here knows this, but October 7th, that is the deadline. We got to get everybody registered by October 7th. I cannot tell you how often we get calls to the election protection hotline of people who say they registered to vote and they registered 2 weeks before election day and it wasn't quite enough. So now is the time. September is National Voter Registration Month. If you're going to get out there and register your friends, family, and neighbors, please do it in the month of September so that we have plenty of time to get folks on the rolls for November. All right, so now we've gone through the top 3 things you need to know with respect to you can't take forms and, don't advise on eligibility, but make sure people are aware of what the criteria are and know the deadline. This is registertovoteflorida.gov is the absolute #1 safest way for anybody to register to vote or to help other people register to vote. As long as a person has a driver license or a state of Florida ID card issued by the Florida Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles, they can use registertovoteflorida.gov, and that is what they should use to register to vote in our current legal context that we're in the state of Florida. It is entirely okay for you to have a tablet with this website on it and let people use that tablet. It is okay for you to give somebody else your phone and let them use this website to register to vote through your phone. It is okay to print up a QR code to this website and let people go to it themselves and stand there. I've stood on the street with people, they did the QR code and I've walked them through it on their own phone, right? There is no restriction on using this website in the community. It will walk people right through the process. And again, you can use your tablet, your computer, your phone. You can hand it over to somebody else and walk it through with them. And it is going to transfer the information to the supervisor of elections. It will be faster. It will have less errors than a paper voter registration form has. It will be less likely to be rejected than a paper voter registration form. And it does not put you at any legal risk. What you need to use this website is your Florida driver's license or state of Florida ID card number, the date of issuance of that card, and the last 4 digits of your social security number. We've got at Common Cause, we have leaned hard into the QR code thing. We have our wonderful little flamingo cards, which we're happy to share with any human being, because we would say that yes, any kind of digital campaign, community campaign to get people to use this website is absolutely going to be the most expedient thing you can do to help. Like I literally registered my hairdresser 2 nights ago because I have my cute new haircut and I registered her to vote while I was sitting there in the chair using my phone. You can do this everywhere. All right. But what do we do with the people who don't have a driver license or a Florida ID? I know in a lot of the work that I've done, I encounter this a lot with out-of-state students. I know that a lot of us really want young people to vote this year. And that can be really hard for people who don't drive or people who don't have a driver's license or can't afford to renew their driver's license or students who actually have an out-of-state driver's license. So if somebody doesn't have a driver's license, or a state of Florida ID card issued by the DMV, they are going to have to use a paper voter registration form. And so now we are back to that first rule that you're not allowed to collect it. So what can you do? Well, the first thing that you can do is they can fill out, this is kind of hard, but like a single individual, they can fill out everything on registertovoteflorida.gov and then they can print it out, sign it and mail it in. So if somebody's doing it in their own home, they can do it that way. That's obviously not that very helpful if you're out on the street organizing people at the community level. So what you can do is you can print blank voter registration forms and you can give them out. So there's no restriction on you printing out the blank form and handing it out in the community. And you can even give them an envelope and a stamp. So you can address the envelope to the county supervisor of elections put a stamp on it and give them the form plus the pre-addressed stamped envelope. If you're working across multiple counties, or like if you want to look at a more statewide program, you don't even have to put the county supervisor of elections address on that envelope, because you can mail these to the Division of Elections. So if you're running a statewide program or a multi-county program, you can also do pre-printed envelopes with the address of the Division of Elections on it, and have voters mail their voter registration form there. So this is, I think, the most popular workaround that we have seen in communities. We've seen folks even have like a sign with an arrow to the nearest mailbox, because the voter has to put it in the mailbox themselves. That's really tricky. Like, you can't have them fill out the form, put it in the envelope, and then hand the envelope back to you to mail. You cannot do that. That counts as collecting the form. So once they have filled out and signed that form, you can't take it back in any form. You can help them fill out the form. If it's a person with disabilities and they ask you for assistance, you can certainly help them. But once they have completed and signed that form, don't touch it. Just don't touch it. Tell them to get over to a mailbox and drop it off. But there are a couple other things you can do besides this mailbox thing. Say you don't have the budget for stamps. And my personal favorite is the library. And Pamela and I were fighting quite hard during the rulemaking process to preserve the ability to return voter registration forms to a library in the state of Florida. And we are continuing to fight to maintain that, because I actually believe in our current legal context, public libraries are the most accessible voter registration location in our communities right now. Every single public library in the state of Florida is a voter registration agency under the National Voter Registration Act. They are a designated agency. That means that at the library, you can use registertovoteflorida.gov. You should be able to print out a form from registertovoteflorida.gov. If the library doesn't have blank forms available, then you can turn in a completed voter registration application to the librarian, right? So I know a lot of folks have done voter registration drives outside rec centers and outside other locations. Doing one outside a library, pretty great, because you can actually just do, but you can give them the form, talk them through it, and then send them right in there to hand that form into the librarian. So I think also looking in your community where you've got libraries that are conveniently situated to help with that process. But again, while you cannot touch that form after it's been completed and signed, you can absolutely facilitate someone on how to get it into a library. You can give them an envelope with a stamp. Other places where you can turn in voter registration forms include, of course, any county supervisor of elections office, any driver's license office or tax collector's office that does IDs. You've got any public assistance office, Medicaid, TANF, all of those offices are voter registration agencies. Any government office that serves people with disabilities, and even military recruitment offices. So looking within your community for where those places are becomes a new tool in our voter registration toolkit, because that is where the voter can walk over and turn it in themselves. You never have to touch it, but you've helped facilitate them submitting that application. Now, our lovely Division of Elections, who likes to make our lives so very easy, used to have the blank voter registration form available for printing right there at registertovoteflorida.gov. Now they don't. Now they send you over to this wonky forms website and make you try to figure out how you're going to find it. So I'm going to make it easier for you to find it. These are the forms. I will post the links in the chat. Again, my posting of links in the chat is not working terribly well this evening, so I will post it when I am done talking. But there is the English one, there's the Spanish one. You can hold your phone up. You will get the PDF right there from that QR code. If you need to print the blank application forms. And of course, at keepfloridavoting.org, you can also find the updated voter registration form. These forms were updated in 2024. They just came into effect in April. So it is a brand new form, but should you happen to have a bunch of old forms printed, do not fear. We can still use the old form. Shocker to all of us that that's allowed, but yes, it is. You can still use the old voter registration form if you've got those lying around. But these are the new forms. Again, I'll put the links because they are a little bit hard to find, a little harder to find than they were before, but we'll try to make it easier for you if we can. So the other thing that third-party voter registration organizations used to really do was help people with the process of filling out a voter registration form. Now, I'm pretty happy to say that the new 2024 form has much better instructions. Another thing that the ACLU and the NAACP and Common Cause fought for during the rulemaking process was better instructions on this form. And it does have better instructions, but it is still really tiny print, and it is still confusing language for some voters. So we have a tip sheet available that you can also use if you're sending folks out there. We have a tip sheet at keepfloridavoting.org, which literally walks people through line by line how to do this correctly so that you can really help folks in the community get it right. The most important things are that lines 1 to 6 and line 15 have to be completed or it won't be processed, and you must sign and date the form. So as long as you can remember these rules that are on the screen right here, the form is going to get through okay. We'd also really remind folks that it has to be legible. Like if you can't read it when you see someone fill it out, ask them to fill it out again, or that form is just going to spin through the process and be really messy. So this is what the new form looks like. It is just a little bit different than the old form. What's always good to know is like if folks are new to voter registration or new to working with the form and they're going to be handing a blank form to a voter and helping to walk them through it, these black boxes that you can see, number 1, 2, 6, and 15, that's your handy reminder of the things that actually need to be completed if you want this form to be processed. Another thing that I know from a lot of voter registration work is if you look at line 4, you don't need both the Florida driver's license number and the last 4 of social. If you're doing a paper form, you only need one or the other. All right. And I think that is kind of one of the easiest things. If you're trying to get somebody to fill it out in the community, they're going to be like, I don't have my driver's license number. And they do not want to stand there and fill in their driver's license number, but you only need the last 4 of social. And this form will go through. So date of birth and last form of social. Another thing to always know on this, certainly you've got the first 3 check boxes. Those go back to that eligibility criteria that I mentioned before. If someone isn't sure if they can check these boxes, they should not continue filling out the form. All right. If they don't know how to check yes or no on US citizen and they can't check the box for number 2 and number 3, they should just not fill it out. They should go get assistance and move onward. I would also say that line number 6 can create some struggle for folks, especially since we are in the middle of a housing crisis and people are really curious about what their residential address is, right? You can't put a PO box here, but you can put a dorm room if you live in a dorm. If somebody doesn't have an address, they can put wherever they're currently staying, right? So if they're not sure, they're moving around a lot, maybe they're staying with their sister, they're staying in a motel, they can put the place that they're currently staying or where they currently receive messages and mail. It is illegal in the state of Florida to deny somebody the right to vote because they don't have an address. And that is super important as so many people have involuntarily been made transient in our communities this year, or in the past couple of years. For anybody who does actually have an address issue, please make sure they do provide a phone number or an email address on line 10 because it's going to make their life a lot easier if there's any questions. And lastly, I would be remiss not to say that the party affiliation thing has created all sorts of questions with election protection. If somebody doesn't select any party, they're going to be registered as no party affiliation. And sometimes that catches them by surprise a little later on when they're trying to vote in a primary. And at the bottom, you can see the oath, and you can see that the oath has been made a little bit more serious on this new form and says it's a 3rd-degree felony. That can also be intimidating to someone. So that's really where, if they're not sure about those first 3 boxes in line 1, 2, and 3, they should definitely not be signing that oath in 15. And that is awful in the state of Florida that this is where we are, but it is where we are, and we certainly want to be protective of voters' overall rights as well as their voting rights. So that is our form. I'm not sure if I am way over time, Pamela, or not. So you tell me if I'm all right. Okay. Are there any questions about the new voter registration form? Then I can stop with that there because it's mostly like the old one, except it's, I think, a little bit clearer. But if you're going to be helping folks register to vote in the community, taking time to understand the form and know how to walk somebody through it really makes a lot of sense. And three PVROs used to do this in the trainings for their staff, and now we need to do this training for each other.
Amy, I do have a question. This is Alona Holmes, if I may.
Hold on, Judge. Hold on.
Okay.
Minister Edwards had her hand up first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Minister
Okay.
Edwards.
I
can't
have a
see the
quick
screen.
question. On line number 6, I know it says no PO boxes. Like if college students, when you live in a dormitory, normally you have a PO box. However, could they put the PO box on line 7?
Precisely.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So, and in our tip sheet, sorry, I was going a bit too fast. In our tip sheet, it does walk folks through this. So line 6 is where you physically live, right? So you can write your dorm room, like I said, wherever you're physically staying. Line 7 is where you get mail. So for a lot of people, they're the same, but if it's different, so a student would put their dorm, their street address of their dorm in their dorm room in line 6, and then they would put their like PO box or their, you know, whatever, wherever they get mail on campus, they would put that PO box in line 7.
Thank you, Judge.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question because it came up last election. For those individuals who are incarcerated, their address is going to be either the Broward County Jail or the North Broward Detention Center. They are awaiting trial. They've not been convicted, and I think Mr. Weeks can speak more about the problems that we were having. They wanted to vote, and as long as they have not been convicted, it has always been my belief that they can fill out the registration and you know, be eligible to vote and get their ballots while they're awaiting trial, even for murder charges, because they've not been convicted.
Yes. Yeah, so if you've, in the state of Florida, if you've not been convicted of a felony, then you have not lost your right to vote. So I think what's tricky with those cases is sometimes if an individual also has a felony conviction in their past, then that can create, so it's just ensuring that they've never had a conviction, right? And that if they did have a prior conviction, you know, in advance of their current situation, that that has been resolved. So I think that for folks who are in jail awaiting trial, that has been one of the questions, is just ensuring that that they don't have a prior conviction which impacts their right to vote. We've also had a lot of questions to the hotline for folks with misdemeanors, and it's the same question. It's a misdemeanor in Florida does not remove your right to vote, of course, but sometimes if somebody may have a felony conviction in their past. So it's just ensuring that that kind of that they can answer that question for like their whole history and not just their current interaction with the system.
Thank you.
That makes sense.
Let me ask you though, so is there anything, and especially Pamela, is there anything, are there any laws that govern the sheriff department, which is for us in Broward, who house those individuals, that they have to do, have to allow their inmates or whatever an opportunity to register and vote if they qualify?
I don't think we have anything that would prevent sheriffs and police from allowing those who are in their custody waiting to vote. We don't have anything that requires it, but we have people who have gone into jails to help register individuals who are eligible to vote. So whereas we don't have requirements, we don't have anything that precludes it.
Thank you. Sonia Burrows, if anyone else who has a question, please raise your hand or put it into the Q&A.
Yes, I have a question about the felony convictions. I heard on a news program that, say someone moved here from Georgia and they had a felony conviction in Georgia, as long as it's not in Florida. Is that correct? Because they were saying about someone else who had been convicted, but since it wasn't in Florida, they had not lost their right to vote.
So out of state is a bit tricky because Florida defers to the laws of the state where the conviction occurred. So that's when you have to know if their rights were restored in Georgia, then they would have the right to vote in Florida, right? I think we heard a lot about this when Donald Trump was convicted in New York, because If he doesn't lose his rights in New York, he wouldn't lose them in Florida. So this is like, I'm not sure if it's officially called reciprocity, but it's that kind of relationship with the laws of the other state that Florida is deferring to. However, if someone's in that situation, I think it does make sense to, if their conviction was for murder or a felony sexual offense, I do think they should consult with an attorney or one of the pro bono attorneys, because my understanding is that might be a bit grayer. But the tool that I will share at the end from the Campaign Legal Center does actually walk people through that as well, and can help them better understand an out-of-state conviction. But it really does hinge on whether or not the state where they were convicted would restore their rights in that situation.
Thank you.
And that's not anything new. Florida's law has always referred to the state of conviction, and it's always been murky and gray.
Yeah.
So when it goes, especially when it comes to the president, former president, and his felony convictions.
Yeah, they get a guarantee of clemency that nobody else gets.
Correct. Jasmine, Shirley?
Thank you very much. I'm Jasmine Shirley, even though I might be hand up as Sonia Burrows. On the question of outreach, like a prison ministry or jail ministry for those that are incarcerated currently, but waiting to get registered and waiting to vote and are not convicted, are there only, is that outreach or that assistance only done by SOE staff, or can any other registered third party voter registration organization assist in those activities as well? And does that same thing apply for a spouse or a dependent, assisting them, but allowing them to get on the vote registration line link that you had indicated, and assist them with that as well?
So I think, as far as any outreach to people who are in jail or incarcerated, I would be extremely careful, unbelievably careful. And indeed, I would recommend that you work with an attorney to design what that outreach looks like. It's not only a matter of the permission of who's allowed to do it. It truly is. We have seen people arrested because they were registered while they were in jail by supervisor of elections staff, and they thought they were eligible, but due to a prior conviction further in their past, they weren't eligible and they were arrested later. And so I think there isn't any protection for the individual if they make a mistake right now. So if you are doing any work with system impacted voters, whether they're currently incarcerated or were previously incarcerated, I would be very careful about that work, and see if you can get in touch with some of the, pro bono attorney resources to do it, because it is really complicated, and there is very little protection for the individual if they make a mistake. And just note that it is a third-degree felony, as you can see on the bottom of this form, to register to vote if you're not eligible, and also to vote, right? So that is two different felonies. And I don't want to be intimidating in the way that we talk about it, but it's just so important to be very careful about working with system-impacted voters. And there are a lot of organizations that have been 3P VROs and now have really scaled up to provide this support, such as the League of Women Voters, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, the Campaign Legal Center. So that would be my guidance on that, is tread very carefully for the sake of the individual voter.
Thank you.
And I will add, who has access to a jail is generally controlled by the sheriff. They're going to assist you getting in or prevent you from getting in. So again, there's no clear definitive law that says you can go in and register anyone. So it is by permission. But as Amy has indicated, it is very murky. It is very scary. But I believe it was in Alachua County. We had a supervisor of elections that sent his staff in to register individuals who were awaiting trial. And a goodly number of them were not eligible to vote, but did vote. And now they have another charge against them.
I would I would also, so the other thing I would want to mention with this is that if you are doing any kind of outreach in any sort of institutional environment, also think about the fact that you cannot collect that form, right? So you would have to be able to do it through register-to-vote-florida.gov. And that includes if you're in other institutional settings, such as an assisted living environment, an educational environment. You cannot collect the form, which would also further complicate any outreach within the jail system.
So you have an assistant living facility, and you have some seniors who may need to update their signature. I think that means you have to use the form, correct?
Yep.
Does the staff there, do the staff members are they allowed to collect and then mail or call the supervisor? How does that work for updating signatures in a facility of some type?
Yeah, so they can't collect it either. Like literally nobody can. So if there is a mail system within that unit, they could put it in the mailbox, right? As long as the individual is the one mailing it. There is also, that is a good environment for, and actually we'll see in a couple slides, one of the things you can do is actually request the supervisor of elections office to go to that facility. So you could help make that arrangement because they would be able to do that registration and signature update. So you could work with the community outreach staff at your county supervisor of elections office for them to go and do that work because they can collect the forms. So that would be a way to manage that. But yeah, it is really hard in those types of settings, but they would have to rely on their standard mail process for how they would normally put something in the mail.
Sonia Burrows, you have another question?
Yes, thank you. I just happened to notice, and I don't know if it's always been there, but I just noticed it on our supervisor of elections website. There was felony notices, and it had a bunch of names with addresses of people. And are they saying that they may be felonies because they've registered, or that they are felonies and you can't register? Because it's labeled felony notices that were mailed out, and it says that you must contact the SOE.
So I hesitate to answer because I haven't actually seen the thing that you're talking about, but what I suspect it is people who they believe have been convicted of a felony and they're being given 30 days notice to determine if they can, to come back to the supervisor with eligibility. Normally, when you see a notice on the supervisor of elections website like that, it's because the voter has been given a 30-day window to say why they're eligible, right? Or to say it's because it's you're going to be removed in 30 days if you don't show us or tell us how and why you're eligible. And I would suspect that that is what you're seeing on that website. But again, I've not seen it myself. I just know that in general, when you see a notice like that on a supervisor's website, it's generally because it is the final 30 days notice before the voter's removed from the rolls, unless the voter comes back with information indicating why they are indeed eligible.
And you're probably seeing that as part of the annual list maintenance process that supervisors are going through now, removing people again who have not voted in the last 2 general elections, moved, who died, and who may be convicted of a felony. So those are all notices to engage in 30 days to show that you are eligible, or request a hearing if you're determined to be ineligible and you still think that you are. You do have the right to appeal.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go on to a couple more slides.
One second, Jasmine, you had another quick question? I know your hand is still up.
Okay, thank you. Quick question, and it's with regard to follow up with Marsha when you said the ALF. I wanted to ask, does that also apply to nursing homes that may want to have, or their residents may want to have their signatures checked, or requesting their next seasonal absentee ballot, or whatever the case may be? Can the SOE staff be the only ones to do that as well and collect that information or assist them with it?
The vote by mail request form is very different rules. And so we would need to have a bit of a different training and discussion on that one. With respect to registration, again, the rule is always the same. You cannot collect the form, right? So they would either have to put it in the mail through their normal mail process, or the supervisor of elections would have to go and do that community outreach process.
In a nursing home setting.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
And they do have outreach programs.
Yeah, Broward definitely has a program, and that any nursing home, ALFs, whatever, all they have a program for that. They just have to be requested to go out. And also here in Broward, I think as I talk to the other folk, we do have the advantage of, I think he does a really good job of identifying, the felony conviction and giving you an opportunity to appeal. So I think that is, we have an advantage here, but from those who are listening as across the state, it might be a different kind of story. Okay, we'll move on. Go right ahead.
Absolutely. So the next thing I want to talk about was an additional thing. This isn't direct voter registration, but there are ways to help somebody get an ID, which will actually make their whole voting process easier, from registration to vote by mail, and the whole process. So I think it's always worthwhile to flag that if you have individuals in your organization who are interested to help people register to vote, it's also helpful to encourage them to help folks get a Florida ID. And there are people who can get a free ID and sometimes might just need some facilitation to help them get over to the DMV or to get that ID. But I just always want to flag how useful it is to help folks get ID, and this might be a 2025 activity, right? Helping folks get in and get their ID so that they can vote more easily and also just participate in general, civically within our communities. It's a great thing to help folks get ID alongside helping them register to vote. And this is almost my last slide. We have this awesome one-pager, which is literally what you can and can't do. It's on the Keep Florida Voting. It's on our webpage, the link I shared earlier. You can download this. It's a really helpful tool for chapters or churches or branches about what folks can and cannot do if they want to help folks register to vote. So we did create this as an easy reference. And on that can do side, it is really hard to see. I'm sure it's pretty small on your screens, but it just sort of summarizes a lot of what I went over about you can share the link to register to vote florida.gov. You can let people use your phone and tablet to register online. Invite your county supervisor of elections to come do voter registration at your event or at a nursing home or at an ALF. Supervisors absolutely have outreach staff, and we need to be appealing to them more than we ever have before, given the new environment that we're in. You can print blank registration forms and give people a stamped self-addressed envelope for them to put that in the mail. You can reserve space at a public library and host a community event, and then have people give their voter registration form right to the librarian. Most public libraries also have a free speech area out front if you wanted to table with voter registration forms and have people walk in and hand it over. You could give people, I know we do rides to the polls, we do souls to the polls. You could do rides to registration for folks who need paper forms, right? You can have folks walk down to a supervisor's office if that's nearby. So thinking of that kind of rides to registration, the way that we help people get to physically vote, we can also help them get to physically register to vote at the local library or supervisor of elections office. If you've got a library that's open on a Sunday and down the street from your church, you could walk people over who need to register on paper or update their signature. You could definitely put on your social media the events where the supervisor of elections office will be, so helping to amplify where they're going to be present, and as I mentioned, helping people get an ID card. But as I'm sure was come across tonight, the number one thing to do is not to accept the forms. One thing I do like to highlight is when we say not accepting the forms, one thing we have seen is that sometimes when folks are in a church or another setting where there's an office that members visit on the regular, they may leave their voter registration form in the inbox or right there in that church office, and that creates a problem for your organization or for the church. So just be careful about that if you've got members or parishioners who might think that they can leave their form in your office. You do not want them to do that. That does create a risk for you. Another thing that's really important to mention, and this is just true for voter registration for everything. This has nothing to do with no laws, but it is illegal to give somebody something in exchange for registering to vote. So you cannot go to a college campus and say, I'll give you a slice of pizza if you register to vote. That is illegal. You are not allowed to do that. So please don't do that. What you can do is give everybody a slice of pizza and encourage as many of them who want to register to vote. But just be aware that you can't have that quid pro quo when it comes to providing people with voter registration. However, there has been no issue so far with giving somebody a stamped self-addressed envelope. That's not exactly the same type of quid pro quo, so don't worry too much about that. So those are some of the things that you can and can't do. Again, we've got a really easy one-pager that you can print off on this. That's pretty much it for me. I am always going to do this final reminder that you cannot collect the form. If you do collect a form, you're going to have to register as a third-party voter registration organization, so please do not do that. And if you have any questions, again, keepfloridavoting.org, or you can email me or my team at florida@commoncause.org. I'm sure Pamela has my direct contacts as well. Anytime anybody needs anything, we are more than happy to help. And with that, that is it for me, and I can take any other questions that folks might have. Yeah, Sean.
Sean Kinsey, go right ahead.
All right, thank you, Madam President. Amy, we received our approval for third-party voter registration, meaning my chapter my fraternity received approval right after Senate Bill 7050 was signed into law, and all of these steep penalties and fines. So is there a way, if we wanted to withdraw or terminate that, can we do that? Because we do have, we are registered as a third-party voter registration thing, or do we just let it expire?
I think you just let it expire since it's every year, but also just don't do those things. Just don't collect the form and you're fine. If you follow these rules, even if you're registered as a 3P Vero, you're still fine.
Okay, but I just don't want to expose the chapter or the fraternity to that.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going to defer to Pamela on whether or not you can.
There are other ways that we can register voters, through vote.org and all those other organizations, correct?
Yeah, that's ultimately going to, so vote.org and a lot of those, they're ultimately taking you just to register to vote Florida.gov. So we don't actually, basically, a lot of online voter registration programs like vote.org or things like that, they're creating a portal to enable the capture of the data so that they can follow up with those voters later, which is obviously very useful in many instances. But what we also know is that sometimes when you have voters have to click through multiple things, they may get discouraged. So if you are in a program where you don't actually need to know the number of how many people you've registered, or you don't need to capture that information, using the official government website of register-to-vote-florida.gov is still the best, fastest, and safest thing for the voter and for you. So there are other programs that you can use, but we would recommend using register-to-vote-florida.gov.
So if we needed to capture that data of registering voters, what site, register-to-vote-florida.org?
I can't really speak to what you would want to do if you're going to do a capture program. That's not something that we run at Common Cause. So we would always say use register-to-vote-florida.gov is the best for the voter.
Okay. All right.
Sean,
Thank you.
If you don't use your registration number, just make sure you don't have that on any of the forms that you all are distributing to people. Your designation number, just make sure you don't have that. And it's generally pretty difficult to monitor who you're registering without using your number to track. I don't know that there is another way that's been specifically developed for you to track who you're registering simply because you're not using that number anymore.
Okay, thank you.
So Pamela, if the senator and I put up a banner outside our office or NAACP office that says register to vote here, but we're using strictly devices. And if we have a paper, we're giving it to them to mail, because in Broward, it's self-addressed stamps form that's there, then that's perfectly fine, correct?
Correct.
Wherever we may table, as long as we're following those rules.
As long as you're following those rules, that is correct.
Okay. Sonia?
It's actually.
Oh,
both of your hands are up.
Oh, me. Okay. Just in terms of capturing data, I think I remember sitting on a webinar where they said you couldn't copy information off of the form. But say we hosted an event and we did want to follow up with people that we registered. Could we have like a sign-in sheet at our table for everybody and then let them do it so that, and a phone number, ask them to put their name and phone number so that we would have it to follow up with them? That's legal.
You can
100%.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Jasmine?
Question for Amy. Are your slide presentation going to be provided in the chat or to Madam President Marcia so that we can get access to it and download the information ourselves?
Yes, actually, everything on my slides is on this webpage, and I'm going to post it again here in the chat as well as the other links. I did also post our tip sheet. I posted the links to the English and Spanish voter registration forms, the activity, the do's and don'ts guide, but it is all available on that How Floridians Can Help Each Other Register to Vote webpage. You'll go through it. You'll be like, hey, this is exactly her slides, because it is exactly my slides.
And
Thank you.
And I want to say that, Amy, if I'm correct, I think we've had 17 NAACP branches to sign up for this particular training. So Common Cause is available to do that for you. If you want to outreach to Amy or to me, we can set you up for a time for you to do that. I know we've thrown a lot of information at everybody this evening, but as Amy indicated, it is on the website. Again, all of this is designed to keep us in a posture of registering people to vote because we have to, and to keep you as safe as possible.
Okay, I wanted to hear from the senator. If you've heard all we got going on here, you've seen our numbers, which were atrocious for Broward County. So what say you?
Yeah, I was really sad by the turnout in the primary. It was lower than it's ever been. But I think we have to take away people's fear. And I think this training gives us a way of doing that we have to be relentless in our efforts to vote. We can't be bullied not to register people and not to turn people out to vote. That's a major tactic that a certain party has put into place where people don't want to go to jail, so they just back away. Marsha and I are also members of a church where we have the supervisor of elections there regularly. And that's a resource that I don't think that a lot of the overall community is aware of that is available, because a part of the supervisor of elections goal is registering people to vote. It's so hypocritical as how the laws and these things are made. But Marsha, I'm with you, the NAACP and all the other organizations. We're not gonna surrender the state of Florida. We're gonna make sure that every person can vote and they can vote without barriers. I'm also a part of the connections of the Social Justice Committee for Alpha Kappa Alpha on the state level, as well as in my chapter. And we're doing all we can on many fronts to canvass, to have informational sessions, and we just have to keep getting this information out. What's been interesting to me, Marsha, is looking at as I'm jumping around with the different organizations, as the response of people you get face-to-face and the response you get virtually. So I think we have some things where we're doing both, but as we learn here tonight, we have to take it back and share it and get others exposed to the information, and just do as much as we can in this window of time that we have for these next few days for this election. And then once this election ends, we got to hit the ground running with this stuff. We can't continue to wait until we're in election time to do the training and the education. We have to do, I know at the NAACP, we have monthly things, but we have to make sure that all of our organizations are continuing this work. So when we get to the gubernatorial race in 2 years, we're already prepared and not reacting.
Thank you. Tony Brown, tell us about Indian River County. And was there something here that's going to help you and your branch as you continue on?
I concur with Senator Osgood. is stop being reactive and being proactive, especially here. We have those dismal numbers. We've had a vicious primary. I think the primary more vicious than the general's going to be, and we persevered. But we have to take from what we learned tonight and kind of manipulate it for our different communities and just go to war. We understand that our communities are dealing with fear factor, and we have to somehow motivate them by any means necessary, because democracy is on the ballot, and we have to put that mindset out there as hard and as much as we can.
And I want to thank also my counterpart, Terry Coney, who is from Lakeland. He's the president of the Lakeland branch NAACP, who has certainly thank you for the information as well. And April Freeman, who is always ready, listening and ready from the Zeta Rho chapter of course, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, who are all in and to making sure that we're going. She has certainly they have planned an event that's coming up, and so now I see that they too are going to be including voter reg and checking voter status at every event that they are going to have. So that's exactly what we need to do as we continue on. Gordon Weeks, are you back? Gordon is probably zipping around in his new electric car. Gordon Weeks. Because the queues are certainly in need of information. I shared with them the office is right next door to our office, his chapter's office, and they were struggling for information. So I mean, they asked for forms, but I hesitated because it was my cousin. I was like, well, I don't want y'all to go to jail. I don't want to get, so we will certainly make sure that they get the information as well, because then Gordon got to get us out. I mean, it's just too messy as we move along. Judge Holmes, because you're gonna have to help Gordon get everybody out if we don't follow these rules that's going on.
I'm ready, willing, and able to do so. I appreciate the Common Cause and ACLU for your assistance, and thank you all for joining us in the struggle to make sure that people have the right to vote and can exercise that right to vote. So thank you all very much.
And certainly, Bridget, there was I'm sure that and New Hope Baptist Church has always been willing to host us, to allow us to table, or to allow us to talk, and I'm sure that they will continue on as we move forward. I don't know. I know that the AMEs that I've heard from, that I've seen, were certainly all in. The Baptists that I've seen, as I mentioned early, and my pastor said to me, saw the numbers. Let me know. I'm in. What do you want me to do? Just tell me and consider it done, because we got to do better than what we are going to. This election is too critical for us to, for lack of information, just not participate. Sonia and Jazz, I know that you are part of a committee with some of your organization. Thoughts?
Well, there's all I was particularly happy to see the do's and don'ts information with getting that out. And in any and every event, ensuring that people have that information passed out, especially the deadlines and dates, participating and collaborating with other organizations, if nothing more than to encourage and motivate, and then steer and direct them to people who can actually do the registrations and or learn or get more information on how to prepare themselves for the general election. And when I say prepare, I was very appreciative of different flyers that people have put out and helping people to understand how to plan and strategize and actually make sure that they follow through with their plan to vote as they start that journey, getting themselves prepared for the general election. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do something, Madam President, on better understanding of the amendments as we move forward. And we would particularly like to collaborate on that effort as well. We're still in discussions on potential dates, and I'll float those to you. to see, you know, if that's a possibility and who will be the best. I know we've had that in person in the past, and it could be a combination of in person and Zooming it for people that might not be able to make the event. But I think though the understanding of those amendments will be a good educational piece for us to do. And we can also Zoom that across the state where others, especially the other NAACP branches, can join in as well.
I have Attorney Pamela Birchford on deck. We just needed to get this part done. I have certainly been stalking her regarding this. And I know that, not that I really care, but I know that there are about 60 other units across the state of Florida who need her assistance as well, but I don't really care about that so much. I think we got to make sure, because we're ready in order to get the information as well. I also see Danette Gibson, who comes from us, who is an NAACP Life member. She's also a Zeta Phi Beta member, who has, when it comes down to getting the information back to the Zetas, I think she certainly is one that we can count on, because we're all going to make sure we have all this together as we move forward. Danette, we didn't talk about this, but can you talk? Because we're going to make sure that we're for real about this partnership in Broward. I'm not speaking of anybody else, but we for real, for real. That's two for reals. Y'all know what that means when it's two of them. Danette Gibson.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
Yes, just wanted to say thank you. Member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, Delta Eta Zeta, Fort Lauderdale. This was very informative, especially the do's and the don'ts. I'm a member of the Social Action Committee for my sorority. We have things in place. We are ready. There's a lot of work we're going to have to do. We're willing to do it. I appreciate Common Cause and ACLU for the information. And I'm definitely going to share this with my chapter. A lot has changed when it comes to voter registration. A lot of stuff I didn't know, didn't realize. So I appreciate that. So, and again, thank you very much. And so we're going to do what we have to do to get voters registered and encourage people to actually vote, because the numbers were terrible with the primary, but we just have to keep pushing forward. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. April Freeman. So we're stalking each other. April and I are stalking each other, just so y'all know. Okay. April Freeman.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so happy to be on here and hear about all the great things that we can continue to do. I don't know about the rest of you, but last week watching that convention gave me so much hope. It filled me up. I was like down for a minute, I'm not gonna lie, but just being a part of witnessing that historic moment got me fired up even more. So I'm excited to be on this call. I'm excited to do so much more in the community. I too am disappointed with the outcome from the primary elections in regards to the turnout. 17% is not enough. The local elections matter just as much as the general election does with president. And we can't have her do what she needs to do. I know we are nonpartisan, but we
In our
cannot
personal capacities, yes. Mhm.
we cannot have a president cannot function unless they have a strong support. And we need to make sure we are also getting that out there into the community. As President Ellison shared, we have an event coming up at the African American Research Library next Wednesday to talk about Amendments 1 and 3, Project 2025. Supervisor of Elections will be there along with the League of Women Voters. So please, if you're listening, come out. Share with the communities. We're doing our best right now to stop preaching to the choir and really going out into the communities with those that actually don't have access to this information. So thank you for allowing me to speak, and I hope to see you all on September 4th.
Thank you. Sonia Burrows.
Yes, I have two more questions because I'm thinking of like neighborhood events. One question, is it okay if you have a neighborhood event and you're doing registration? Can you have campaign signs on the premises? Like if they're not partisan, but say you have people running for office. Does it have to be clear of any campaign signs if you're doing voter registration?
So with voter registration, you have to register anybody. who wants to register, right? Like
Right.
if somebody comes up to you wearing a t-shirt of a candidate that you do not like, and they would like your support, voter registration, you got to help them. Like voter registration is a nonpartisan activity. Even if parties do it, they have to actually, so you could have like a Democratic Party tent, and a Republican walks in there, they have to register them to vote. So I wouldn't worry too much about the campaign signs. I mean, obviously that gives a certain vibe. It depends on everything else just going around if you're doing it as C3 and all this work. But I would just say that the main rule with voter registration is you got to register anybody who wants your help.
Right. I have a building, and I do have I traditionally have a lot of campaign signs on the fence around my building, but I'm thinking of hosting a registration event, and I mean, that's where a lot of people put their campaign signs, and I just wanted to make sure that wouldn't be a problem. And then the other question was, if I do like a registration sign or a sign-up sheet as people come in to register, is it okay to also have a checkbox for them to say, is it okay? Do you give permission for me to check your registration? So once they sign up and say like a week later, I can go in and look up there to make sure that their registration went through. Would that be legal?
That's a really good question that I have never been asked. So I'm going to have to take that back unless Pamela knows the answer.
I don't know that there's a pat answer for that, but I would be very cautious about doing that. It's easier to have that done when that person is standing there with you and giving you that instantaneous verbal information and permission. If you have a list of who you registered and a contact, it's better for you to call that person and walk that person through how to check their registration.
Okay.
I would add that it's also good to be able to, walk the person through how to check their registration. So it's another opportunity to empower the individual so that they can check and continue to check, because with list maintenance and things like that, someone could be registered today and then maybe not in 2 weeks from today. So it's, it's good to do that process with the person there, and so that they know how to do it going forward.
I was just thinking it like a follow-up, like when you register somebody to make sure, but I could call them and say, this is how you walk through to check your registration. Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I think reaching out to them about like, hey, you did it, you registered, double check. But of course, if you registered them online, most chances it's going to go through.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, based on those questions, I've done a lot of reading on the election police, and we have to be careful because they unidentifiable, and the devil amongst us. I know, Marsha, you remember when NAACP, we had some instances where we were infiltrated. So, just reading up on these group of idiots, I think we have to have due caution, because we don't know who they are. We don't know their uniforms. We don't know anything about them, and they could be standing beside us, or they could be one of those people that's wanting this help. Just a thought.
And I would tell you, I'm in the Senate, and we still haven't gotten a job description for those people. We just approved money. Well, I was a no vote, but we have no clue of what they doing and what we paying them to do with all this money that has been appropriated to them. We don't know what their qualifications are. If they got to have a PhD or GED or no kind of ED or whatever. But it is the most obscure thing that I've ever seen happen from any kind of organizational structure, that you would appropriate millions of dollars to fund a whole department and not give any criteria, any job descriptions, or anything.
President Coney, you're in Polk County, Lakeland. Give us a few comments, sir. Glad you were able to get on.
Well, first of all, thank you for all that fantastic information. I guess 17% is a common number around the state, because that was pretty much the turnout numbers in Polk County. And we constantly focus on voter registration, but what I've told people in my branch is that we can't register enough people to make up for all the people that are registered to vote that didn't vote. So we're really going to try working hard on voter registration in September. Then in October, we're going into a full get out the vote mode. And we're currently planning a big get out the vote rally called Rock Your Vote on the 26th of October. And it's going to be in a park, but close to one of the early voting facilities where we'll have food trucks and music and all that. And then people interspersed to talk about voting issues and the amendments, but they will be close enough to the voting facility, more than 100 yards away, but they can, while they're partying and have a good time, they can go vote. So, and we're just looking for all kind of possibilities just to get people out to vote, because as everybody else said, yes, it is important. Democracy is at stake, but we're also looking for kitchen table issues to make so people understand how it affects them, whether it's the medicine, prescription drugs, insulin, education, all of those things are affected when you talk about voting. So we'll be out there beating the bushes. And I actually met with some ministers, the local ministerial council for the county last Monday, and kind of gave them some history on the Black church and the civil rights movement, because I think we have some younger pastors that they don't focus or emphasize that as much as some of your older ministers. So one of the ministers is actually they're splitting up Project 2025 in the sections, and then they're going to get back together and just discuss that. And a date has been set for September 14th. And while they're doing that, we're going to have people out there to register people to vote. I think the cell phone thing is fantastic, because on Saturday round, and I'm sure down in South Florida it's the same, you have tons of people out at youth football games. So you can just, have to worry about the paper. Just ask them if they hadn't registered, show them how to do it on the phone. So we're here with you, we're supporting you, and again, thank you.
Okay, and just remember that we have a resource in Senator Osgood. She has kind of a 2-pager, a cheat sheet for Project 2025. She's already started making the rounds. I mean, we have a very good resource, and she's NAACP straight up. So if you want the truth and you want to know all about it and make sure that you get the correct information, feel free to reach out. She's always available. She's volunteered her services to walk through it so that we all understand it. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, and so final thing, I want to make sure before we get off, I believe that we have to choose an election day. Sonia Burrows, and I think we tentatively have decided 11/14/2024. It'll be after our election from 4 to 8 p.m. Is there a motion for the membership?
I'd like to move that we hold the election on 11/14/2024.
I'll second the motion. Second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. The branch hold its annual branch election on November 14th, 4 to 8 p.m. This will be via Election Buddy. All those in favor, let it be known by the sound of aye.
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 Those against, nay. Ayes have it. Final thoughts as we go around the horn. Let us go with Senator, and we're gonna end up with Attorney Pamela Birchford. Okay.
Thank you, Madam President. And I have been involved in a lot of conversations about Project 2025. It's kind of what's making me lose sleep and gaining weight right now. I'm having to eat a whole lot more butter pecan ice cream to try to keep calm, since I can't drink because I'm in recovery. But it gets people's attention when you explain to them that now with this plan, all of the kids that are in public school systems only will have to take the military entrance exam. So we see how we're being set up for different things. You explain to them how the Department of USDA will be totally eliminated so farmers can grow food faster and cheaper with pesticides and any other things they want to put on it, and you won't know. Really, literally sets us up to eat ourselves to death. This is one of the most egregious plans that have come forward. And it's a simple thought process of a few elite white Christian nationalists who wants freedom from the government and all of us, but wants to use the government to control us to the extent of eliminating free lunch programs and saying to people that get food stamps that they have to work more. If I'm on food stamps and I'm working, it means now I'm a part of the working poor. So please encourage everyone. Project 2025 is their own writing. It's a great tool to use to explain to people with common sense, no matter what their party is, or why we need to vote in this election to make sure that we elect people that's going to prioritize people. It is the new form of slavery, lynching, that will create increased mass incarceration, take women's rights away on every level, and literally sends us back to a plantation that will be either red or blue this time. So we have to be very intentional about speaking up against injustice. And if you got a church group, I would love to talk to any church group, because the book of Amos and the book of Romans, especially chapter 1, verse number 18, gives a mandate for people of faith to fight against wickedness and injustice. So please, let's continue to fight. When we get tired, we have to depend on each other to be strengthened, but we cannot surrender this state or this nation to this thought process of these white Christian nationalists.
Thank you, President Brown.
All right. That's good. I mean, you're hitting the home runs for such a time as this. And we have, us who are no better, we have to now come out of this cocoon we're in and realize our people don't know what they don't know that they don't know, and put some boots on the ground and get back to some realness and let them know we're headed back to the plantation.
Thank
If
you.
they don't vote.
Correct. Pamela Birchford, our attorney, even though she tried not to be our attorney, she is. And she's our political advisor. She's our lobbyist. She is our voice on the Hill. Pamela Birchford, attorney.
Thank you so much, President Ellison. This was just so inspiring to hear all of you focus on why this information was so important. Senator Osgood knocked it out of the park. She failed to say, though, that Project 2025 will make Jesus white again.
Oh, yes.
We don't believe he was white. I can argue that the original Hebrews look like me, so that's a whole nother conversation. I never believed he was white.
I'm with you, but you know they're going to bring it out again, and that will not be a good move for any of us. But this information, hopefully tonight, will be useful and beneficial to many of you. Again, I know we put a lot on the table, but Amy has indicated it's all available to you, easily downloadable. And Common Cause is available to do this again for any of the branches that sign up. We still have a little time to do some educating, but I want to say what is most important here is that your community know who you are. So when you get out there, they trust you. And if you share with them how to get themselves registered to vote, they will do it. So you all are the most important part of this operation, is getting out into the public, because they know that you are the Florida NAACP with an historic moniker of being a civil rights warrior and a voting rights warrior. So getting out there, getting people registered to vote is a mandate for us all. But again, thank you for being here. Thanks to my colleagues, Kara and Amy. You all know how much I appreciate you. I want to share with everybody, we do so much fighting in Tallahassee. You have no idea. After we get through fighting in the legislature, then we're over at the Division of Elections because they have to implement rules for all these terrible laws. And so we have to start the fighting all over again. And there's a lot of danger out there. There's a lot of focus to keep us from voting, but we will not be defeated because we know when we fight, we win.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for joining us. I remind you that if you are not currently a member of the NAACP, please make sure that you join. The only thing missing from the struggle is you. We are going to close out, since the other preachers had something to say, we're going to close out with our Religious Affairs Chair. Your line, Sister Pamela Birchford, Minister Bridget Edwards. Minister Edwards, take us home, please.
Madam President, and to all assembled, let us go to the throne of grace. Most gracious, eternal God and Father, we give thanks to you for what our eyes have seen and our ears have heard. God, we thank you for the increase in our understanding. Lord, we pray now that you would continue to be the wind beneath our wings. God, your word says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask you. So we asked, and God, you have granted. We pray now, Father, for the senator, that you would give her strength and give her, oh God, what she needs, that she might continue to stand for your people. We pray, Father, for Attorney Birch and for all others, Birchford and others that are fighting the good fight of faith. We pray for Amy Keith, and we pray, oh God, for Kyra Gross, that you would be with them, be with the NAACP and all concerned parties, be with the Divine Nine, oh God, be with the judge as she takes a stand, oh God, be with us all. We pray as we go forward in your name, being about your work of justice. In Christ Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. You will see this video on all of our channels for other review. Thank you and have a good evening. Appreciate it.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.